The rope went tight in the boy's hands. Down at the bottom of the well shaft, 14 feet below the dry Kansas grass, Cordelia Ashford pressed her bleeding palms against the cool stone wall and listened to her own breathing. The morning air up at the rim smelled of cottonwood leaves. Down here, it smelled of earth that had not seen daylight in 1,000 years. She was 28 years old. She was a widow of 3 months. Her father-in-law had been dead 5. She had buried 2 men that spring. She had buried a marriage. She had buried, she thought, every plan she had ever made. But she had not buried her grandfather's notebook. "Mama!" Wesley's voice came down the shaft, steady for a 10-year-old boy with a hemp rope cutting into his small hands. "The bucket's ready." Cordelia looked up. She could see the round mouth of the well, and beyond it, framed against the pale July sky, the silver-green leaves of 5 old cottonwoods, moving in a wind she could not feel. 3 days ago, Cyrus Hadley had stood on her porch with his hat in his hands and told her this land was dry. He had offered her $36 for 180 acres. He had not asked about the trees. Her grandfather had taught her, when she was 9 years old, that the trees know before the well does. She wrapped her hand around the rope. "Pull, Wesley," she said. "Pull steady." But the morning the well finally gave its water was not the morning this story begins. The story begins 3 weeks earlier, on the porch, with a man holding his hat. The morning Cyrus Hadley came up the porch steps for the 3rd time, Cordelia Ashford was already wearing her second-best dress, the blue calico, the one she had married Tobias in, the one she had worn to her father-in-law's burying, the one she had pressed flat at 4 in the morning because she had known, the way a woman knows. She had known the men would come before sundown, except they came at noon. She watched him from the kitchen window, Hadley dismounting at her gate, the 2 younger men still half a mile out at the south quarter, hauling the iron rod up the wooden derrick for the last time, the bucket at the end of the rope swinging dry, pale dust spilling out as it rose. 3 days, 60 feet, nothing. Cordelia pressed her palm flat against the window pane. "Mama," Wesley was at the stove, stirring cornmeal. He was 10 years old and small for 10, and already he had learned to cook a plain supper while his mother kept her hands busy elsewhere. He did not turn around. "Mama, I know. I know you know. He's coming up now. I see him. Are you going to open the door?" "Before he knocks." "Why?" Because a woman who waits for the knock has already lost the conversation. Because her grandfather had told her once, when she was 9 years old and counting cottonwoods on a creek bank in Riley County, that men with hats in their hands always speak softer to a woman who answers the door before they reach the 2nd step. Cordelia did not say any of that. She wiped her hands on her apron. She crossed the small front room. She opened the door. Hadley stopped with one boot raised. He removed his hat in the slow, formal way of a man who had practiced the gesture many times that summer. His salt and pepper beard was trimmed close. His coat had been good wool once, dust gray now from the prairie. His eyes were tired in a way Cordelia had not seen on him before. Not yesterday, not the day before that. She filed that away, without quite knowing why. "Mrs. Ashford." "Mr. Hadley." The rod went 60 feet. "I see. I'm sorry to say it. The deep aquifer has retreated under this whole township. There's no water here, not for 50 miles in any direction." "You're certain?" "I've drilled on the high plains 9 years. 600 wells between here and the Oklahoma line. The rod tells you what's down there. Nothing personal, Ma'am." "I'd not take it personal." He produced a folded paper from his coat. He set it on the porch rail himself. He did not hand it to her. He did not want her to refuse it from his hand. "I wrote up an offer last night. $36 for the full 180, 20 cents an acre. It's the kindest thing I can do for you and the boy." She did not reach for the paper. I'll think on it, Mr. Hadley. Don't think too long. Winter's 6 weeks out. The Eastern train runs Tuesdays. Good morning, Mr. Hadley. She closed the door before her face could change. She heard his boots descend the porch. She heard him remount. She did not move from the door until the sound of the horse was small. When she turned around, Wesley was holding the wooden spoon as if he had forgotten what to do with it. Eat your dinner, she said. Then bring me the ledger from the desk. She counted the money on the kitchen table while he ate. $14.30, in coin and small bills. The drilling fee in May had been $40. Hadley had drilled the failing kitchen well in May. After Tobias was already 3 weeks in the ground, she had paid him from the last of the savings because she had thought then that if she could only find water, she could hold the patent. She had paid $40 for 36. She put her hand on the ledger and held it there. Wesley set his bowl in the sink. Mama. Yes. Are we leaving? No. Then where will we get the water? She did not answer, because she did not know. The truth was, she had not slept in their bed for 92 nights. She had slept in Tobias's chair by the window with her shawl pulled up, because their bed was where he was supposed to be, because the bed remembered his shape the way the Cottonwoods would remember a thing she did not yet know they were remembering. She was not ready to lie down where he had lain. She might never be ready. Wesley. Yes, Mama. Go feed the chickens. He went. She sat at the kitchen table alone, and she opened the federal homestead claim register on the wall above the desk, and she read it for the 100th time. 3 years filed under Jeremiah Ashford, 2 years to prove up. The patent, when it came, required a documented water source, a dwelling, and continuous cultivation under the rules the Trego County Land Office enforced. Jeremiah had filed under his own name. He had meant to deed the land over to Tobias once the patent came through. He had been a stubborn old man about a great many things, and one of those things was paperwork. He had said, more than once, that he would sign the land over to his son when he was good and ready. He had said it the Christmas before last with a glass of cider in his hand. He had not been good and ready. He had been dead by February. Typhoid. 3 weeks from the first fever to the last breath. And Tobias, who should have inherited, who would have inherited, who was the only son and the rightful heir and the man who had broken the sod on this quarter section with his own hands. Tobias had not lived long enough to see the probate filed. Tobias had ridden to fetch the doctor for a neighbor's child in April. The mare had come back at sundown with an empty saddle. They found Tobias the next morning in a draw, 2 miles east, his neck broken clean. The mare had spooked at something neither of them would ever know. So now the land was suspended, in the legal phrase that lawyer Eldridge had used at his desk in Marlin Springs 3 weeks ago. Suspended. Cordelia had a vague legal claim through her marriage, but the patent process would have to begin, in some form, again, with her name on the papers this time, and the county land office wanted, before they would forward her case to the Federal Register, proof of a domestic water source on the quarter. Eldridge had said it kindly enough. Without water, Mrs. Ashford, the office may treat the claim as relinquished. There are speculators watching, a great many speculators. She had asked him then, was there any other way? You could remarry within the year, he had said. A husband would simplify the paperwork considerably. She had not answered. She had walked out of his office, and she had walked the 3 miles home, and she had not spoken to Wesley about it. Of the 4 widows in Trego County that summer, 3 had already signed marriage papers inside the 12-month custom. A cowboy, a German farmer, a Methodist preacher whose first wife was barely cold. Cordelia was the 4th. She was the only one who had not signed. She would not sign before her year was out. She would not sign at all. A wagon rattled outside. She lifted the curtain. Henrietta Holcomb was climbing down at the front gate. half a loaf of bread under one arm, an apologetic look already arranged on her face. Cordelia opened the door. Some kindnesses were harder to receive than refusals. Hetty stayed 20 minutes. She left the bread, half a jar of plum preserves, an apology that took most of those minutes to deliver. Cordelia, Hank and I would help with grain through winter. We would, except Hank still owes Mr. Hadley for last March's pump work. You understand? I understand. It's only the men in the valley take Hadley's word for these things. They have to. He's the only rig within 80 miles. I know it. I'll bring more bread Friday. If there's still a place to bring it to. Hetty climbed back into the wagon. She did not look back. Cordelia stood at the gate until the dust had settled. Inside, Wesley was already in his bed in the loft. She did not light the second lamp. She sat at the kitchen table with a small flame between her hands, and she tried to read the ledger one more time. The figures had not changed. She slept, perhaps 2 hours, perhaps less. At 2:15, by the pendulum clock, she gave up. She lit the lamp again. She went to Tobias's old desk in the corner, the one that had been Jeremiah's before it was Tobias's, the one that had come west on a wagon from Ohio in 1872 with 3 generations of papers crammed into its drawers. She pulled the bottom drawer all the way out. She had been meaning to do it for weeks. She had been meaning to find the deed papers, the ones Eldridge said she would need, the ones Jeremiah had said, that Christmas before last, were all in order, all in order. Don't you fret about it, Della. She had fretted about it. She had not fretted hard enough. The drawer held 3 years of farm receipts, a small tin of pencils, a bundle of letters tied with red string from Jeremiah's sister in Indiana, and beneath all of that, a thin leather notebook she did not recognize. She pulled it out. The cover was soft, worn at the corners, smaller than her hand. She did not know what made her open it. She opened it. Inside, on the first page, in pencil, in a hand she had not seen since she was 21 years old. Ezra Mosley, Surveyor's Notes, Smoky Hill to Solomon River. Cordelia stopped breathing. Her grandfather's hand, her grandfather's notebook. Her grandfather had been dead 7 winters. She had buried him herself in a churchyard in Riley County in the winter of 1880. She had been 21 years old. She had been newly married. She had cried for a week, and then she had not cried again. His notebook had been on his bedside table the morning the pneumonia took him. She had put it in her trunk and closed the lid because the sight of his small, careful handwriting had been too much to bear that week. She had not opened the trunk again. She had married Tobias, and they had come west, and the trunk had sat in a corner of their first dugout, and then in this kitchen, and she had not opened it. She had not opened it. So how was her grandfather's notebook in her father-in-law's desk? Cordelia sat down hard on the kitchen chair. The notebook fell open in her lap. A folded paper slid out from between the back pages and landed on her apron. She picked it up. It was a letter, the paper yellow at the edges, the fold creases deep with age. The handwriting was not her grandfather's. The handwriting was Jeremiah's, her father-in-law's. The letter was addressed to no one. The letter was dated June 14th, 1858. Ezra, it began. The land between the forks is harder than any country I have walked. But you and I and Sigurd have not walked 400 miles in this heat for nothing. The springs you marked on the upland will hold. I believe you. The boy I will have someday will need this land. He does not yet exist, but I am writing this letter to him through you. If you outlive me, give him this notebook when he is grown. If I outlive you, I will give it to him myself. We made a country together with our boots and a leather book. Let it not be lost. Your friend through whatever country comes, Jeremiah Ashford. Cordelia read it 3 times. Then she put it down on the kitchen table because her hands were shaking. Her father-in-law and her grandfather had walked the surveys together in 1858, 29 years before this kitchen, 29 years before Wesley, 23 years before her own marriage, 3 years before the war, before any of them had known any of them would matter to any of the others. 2 old men, a leather notebook, a country made with boots. She had married into a family already tied to her own family by a thing neither family had told her about. Or perhaps Tobias had not known. Perhaps Jeremiah had been waiting for the right moment. The kind of moment a stubborn man waits for and never quite finds. Sigurd. The letter mentioned a third man. Sigurd. She knew only one Sigurd in this country. The Norwegian postmaster at Larchbend, Mr. Olafsen. The man who had taken her general delivery letters once or twice with a long, careful look that she had never been able to read. She had not been able to read it. She thought now that she might be beginning to. But that was for later. She turned back to the notebook itself. Her grandfather had not drawn maps. He had drawn trees, page after page of pencil sketches. The willows along Mulberry Creek, soapweed on the hard sand, a sand cherry thicket with notes on its root depth, cottonwoods especially, always cottonwoods, each sketch with a small arrow pointing down, a number written beside it. On a page near the middle, she stopped. He had drawn 5 cottonwood trunks in a circle. The trunks were heavy and deeply cross-hatched. The leaves were sketched as small feathered shapes. Beneath the drawing, in his careful pencil line, cottonwoods take their water from above clay, 5 together within a wagon's width, water within 12 feet of your boots. The tree drinks what the rod cannot reach. Cordelia set the notebook on the table and pressed both palms down on it to steady the trembling in her hands. She remembered, suddenly, clearly. Her body remembered before her mind did. She was 9 years old. She was walking beside her grandfather along the bend of a dry creek in eastern Kansas, near the Riley County line. She was wearing a pinafore that itched at the neck. He was wearing a leather vest. His hair was already white at the temples. His pencil was tucked behind his ear, the way other men tucked tobacco. He had stopped at a single cottonwood on the gravel bank. The bark had been gray-brown, deeply furrowed even then. "How old, child?" "I don't know, Grandpa. 22 summers. The bark tells you. Now, how many cottonwoods stand within the throw of your bonnet?" She had counted, looking up. 5, Grandpa. He had set his hand on the trunk of the nearest tree, as if greeting it. "Then the water is closer than the men with their iron rods could ever guess. The trees know before the well does. Remember that, Cordelia. Men forget. You won't, if I do my work right." She had not understood then. She had been 9. She had been counting on her fingers. He had said something else then, something she had not remembered until this moment. He had said, "Someday, Cordelia, you will need this. I do not know when, but I know you will need it, so I am teaching you now." Cordelia put her hand over her mouth. She made no sound. Wesley was asleep in the loft. The pendulum clock ticked. Outside, somewhere far off, a coyote spoke once and was answered. She sat with the notebook open on the table, and she let her shoulders shake without making a noise. She had not cried at Jeremiah's funeral because she had been holding Tobias up. She had not cried at Tobias's funeral because she had been holding Wesley up. She cried now. She cried for her grandfather, who had carried a small leather book through 400 miles of country and made a friend of a stubborn Ohioan named Jeremiah, and never told her any of it because perhaps he had thought there would be more time. She cried for Jeremiah, who had carried that same book in the bottom drawer of his desk for 7 winters, waiting for a moment that had never come. She cried for Tobias, who had ridden out one April afternoon to fetch a doctor for a neighbor's child, and had not come home. When she stopped, the lamp was low. The pendulum clock said 4. She wiped her face on her apron. She turned the page of the notebook. She did not close it again until the sun came up. She did not tell Wesley about the notebook at breakfast. She told him after. When the dishes were dry and the 2 milking cows had been led to the seep 3 miles south. The seep that had not been enough to prove up. The seep that ran low in August and dry by October. She set the small leather book on the table between them. She put her finger on the page with the 5 trunks. Wesley, your great-grandfather wrote this for me when I was a girl. I had forgotten most of it, until last night. Wesley leaned over the page. He could not yet read all the script. He traced the Cottonwoods sketches with his finger, the way he traced the creatures in his Sunday primaire. What does it mean, Mama? It means we are going to do something the men in the valley have forgotten how to do. What? We're going to walk slow and listen. Listen to what? To the trees. He looked at her. He nodded. The way 10-year-old boys nod when they are choosing to trust a thing they do not yet understand. Mama. Yes. Did Grandpa Jeremiah know about this book? She looked at her son. She had not yet shown him the letter. Yes, child, he knew. Then why didn't he tell us? She did not answer for a long moment. He was waiting, she said. For the right time. Did he know the right time would come? I think he did. He may not have known when. Wesley folded the corner of the page very carefully. Mama? Yes. I'd like to carry the book. You would? In my shirt pocket, while we walk. All right? She gave him the notebook. He put it in his shirt pocket. The notebook was just small enough to fit. The pocket was just big enough to hold it. He put his hand on the outside of the pocket and pressed it flat. Mama? Yes. When do we start? Now. She tied her bonnet. She filled the canvas water bag at the rain barrel. She put 2 pieces of yesterday's cornbread in a flour sack. She and Wesley walked out the kitchen door together at 9:30 in the morning of the 5th of July, 1887. Behind them, on the kitchen table, the offer from Cyrus Hadley sat folded under the salt cellar. She had not signed it. She would not sign it. Not today, not tomorrow. She walked the south quarter on the first day. She counted stragglers along the dry creek bed, single cottonwoods, 2 together at once, never the cluster of 5. She was learning to count not just the trunks, but the bark. The notebook was clear. Deep furrows meant old roots. Old roots meant a long history of drinking from the same shallow place. The young trees with smooth grey bark had not yet found their water. By dusk, she had counted 47 cottonwoods on the south quarter, not one cluster of 5 within a wagon's width. She walked the west quarter on the second day. Wesley came with her, the notebook in his shirt pocket. They found a stand of 3 together near the dip, where Tobias had once thought of putting a sod barn. The trunks were narrow. The bark was only just beginning to furrow. 3 is hope, Wesley, she said quietly. But it is not enough. No, it is not enough. Wesley wrote 3, too young in the back of the notebook in his careful schoolboy hand. He had asked her permission first. The afternoon of the second day was when Hadley rode past. He reined his horse up at the south fence. He looked at the small woman walking slowly along the line of dead grass, the boy trailing behind her. Hadley laughed once, sharp. Mrs. Ashford, you'll wear out shoes you can't afford to replace. She did not answer. Did you lose something out here? No, Mr. Hadley. He waited for her to argue. She did not argue. He waited longer than he had meant to wait. Then he touched his hat brim and rode east toward Marlin Springs. Wesley watched the horse get small. Mama, why didn't you tell him? Because he wouldn't have heard me. When will he? When we have something to show him. She walked the upland on the third day. The upland was the part of her quarter section the men in the valley said was the worst. It was a slight rise on the northeast corner, treeless from any distance, the grass already gone gold in the July sun. The drillers had set their derrick on the lower ground where men expected water to be. The notebook said otherwise. The notebook said, "Look for the dark green inside the gold." She walked the upland slowly, once with her eyes on the ground, once with her eyes on the horizon for color. She found them on the second pass, a small rise, no higher than a man's shoulder, and on the rise, 5 mature cottonwoods, standing close enough that their crowns made one shared shadow. The trunks were 18, 19, 24 inches across. The bark was gray-brown and so deeply furrowed that her finger could lay full inside the grooves. Inside the circle of the canopy, the prairie grass was still silver-green. Outside it, the grass had gone the color of dry straw. Cordelia stood at the edge of the green. She did not move for a long time. The wind came through the heart-shaped leaves above her. She had not heard that sound since she was 9 years old. The tree drinks what the rod cannot reach. She heard her grandfather's voice as plainly as if he were standing at her elbow. She walked into the center of the circle. Wesley came up the rise behind her. "Mama, the leaves are silver." "Yes." "Are we going to dig here?" "Tomorrow, at first light." She set her boot heel where the ground felt firmest. She drove a stake of cottonwood deadfall into the earth with 3 steady blows of the hammer she had carried in her apron pocket for 2 days. She put her hand on the deepest furrowed of the 5 trunks. The wind moved the leaves once more. The shared shadow held them both. Tomorrow at first light, the work would begin. Tonight she stood in the shared shadow of 5 trees her grandfather had taught her to find when she was 9 years old. She stood there until the sun was gone. Then she took her son's hand, and they walked back down the rise together toward a kitchen with a folded offer under the salt cellar and a lamp that would burn until morning. Cordelia woke before dawn on the 4th day. She lit the kitchen lamp. She packed the day's tools: Tobias's pickaxe, 2 shovels, the long-handled one for soil, the short-handled one for the close work of the shaft, 60 feet of hemp rope from the barn, the oak bucket from the kitchen well that had failed her in spring, 3 poles of cottonwood deadfall for the windlass. She carried them up the rise in 2 trips, while the sky behind the prairie turned the color of weak tea. Wesley followed on the second trip, half asleep, dragging his boots. "Eat your bread on the walk," she said. "Mama." "Eat, Wesley." "When do we start?" "When the light comes." The first cut was the hardest. The sod on the upland was 3 years tight, a hand's length deep. She brought the pickaxe down with both arms and her whole shoulder behind the swing. The blade bounced. She struck again. Again. By the time the sun cleared the eastern grass, she had broken through the sod and was into the dry, sandy loam beneath. By noon, she was 2 feet down. She drank water. She ate cold bread. She climbed back into the hole. Wesley worked the windlass alone all afternoon. He had set it the night before. 3 poles lashed at the apex with hemp, the bucket riding the rope between 2 pulleys made from his great-grandfather's harness brass. He hauled up bucket after bucket of dry, pale loam and tipped them onto the growing mound. He did not complain. He did not ask when they would stop. By the 2nd day of the digging, he had learned how to feed her water without being asked. She would knock the bucket twice with the side of her shovel. He would lower the canvas bag. She would knock 3 times when she needed to come up. By the end of the 5th day, she was 4 feet down. The walls of the shaft were powder dry. That afternoon was when Wesley found it. He had been turning the pages of the notebook by the windlass. He had a habit of doing it when his mother was deep in the shaft. He liked the cottonwood drawings. He liked the willow page. He turned a page near the very back, a page he had not turned before. The paper was thicker there, heavier. A folded square slipped out and landed in his lap. Wesley picked it up. It was not in his great-grandfather's hand. The handwriting was bigger, squarer. The ink was the deep brown of a fountain pen barrel. He recognized the hand. He had seen it on the receipts in the bottom drawer, Grandpa Jeremiah's hand. He read it slowly, mouthing the words. He was 10 years old. The schoolboy script was beyond him in places, but he caught enough. Then he caught all of it. He sat very still on the edge of the windlass platform. He looked down into the shaft. His mother was a small, dark shape at the bottom. "Mama." "What?" "Come up." "Wesley, I just went down." "Mama, come up, please." She came up. She climbed the makeshift ladder of stakes she had driven into the wall. She came up dirty, her hands wrapped in strips of one of Wesley's old shirts. She sat on the upturned pickaxe at the rim. "Show me." Wesley handed her the paper. She unfolded it. She read, "Della, if you are reading this, the boy has found it where I left it. I left it in the back of your grandfather's book on purpose. I did not know how to give it to you with my own hand. I am a stubborn man, and I have been a stubborn father, and I will likely die a stubborn old fool. But I knew this land. I walked it once with your grandfather and Sigurd Olafsen in 1858. There is water on the upland, 5 cottonwoods together on a rise. I did not tell my son. I did not tell you. I told myself the land must give itself when it was ready. I was wrong. A man should give what he has when he has it. I am writing this in case I do not. Forgive me. Jeremiah." The date underneath was October 3rd, 1886, 4 months before he had died. Cordelia held the paper in both hands. She did not move for a long time. "Mama." "Yes, Wesley." "He knew." "Yes." "And he didn't tell?" "No." "Why?" "Because he was waiting for the land to give itself." "What does that mean?" "It means he was a stubborn old man who loved you and your father very much and didn't know how to say it." "Did Papa know?" "No, I don't think so." "Then we are the only ones." "Yes, Wesley, we are." He thought about that. "Mama." "Yes." "I'm glad he wrote it down." "So am I." She folded the letter carefully along its old creases. She put it in the inside pocket of her dress. She wiped her nose on the back of her bandaged hand. She stood up. "Lower the bucket. I'm going back down." He lowered the bucket. She went back down. She did not stop digging until the sun was setting. That night, by lamplight at the kitchen table, she fixed her own hands. 8 new blisters from the day. She warmed bacon grease in a small tin. She worked it into her palms. Wesley sat across from her. He read the Cottonwood passage aloud. He had read it every night for 5 nights now. He was getting smoother at it. She listened to him read. She thought about Jeremiah, about a stubborn old Ohioan who had walked the surveys with her grandfather in 1858 and had filed on a quarter section with 5 cottonwoods on the upland 15 years later because he had remembered the country in his bones. She thought he had loved her in his way. He had not known how to say it. She thought she had not known how to receive it. She pressed her bandaged palms flat on the table. "Wesley." "Yes, Mama." "You read good." "Thank you. Go to bed." He went. The 6th day, she was 5 feet down. The 7th day, she was 6 feet down. It was on the 7th day that Hadley came back. Not on the road this time. He rode straight up the rise. His horse stopped on its own at the edge of the green grass. Hadley dismounted. He walked the last 10 paces. Cordelia was at the bottom, 6 feet of stone and loam between her and the sky, the bandages on her hands grey with sweat and dirt. "Mrs. Ashford." She did not answer. She brought the shovel down. "Mrs. Ashford, the county land office takes a dim view of homestead claimants who refuse a fair offer and dig dry holes through the harvest season. Mr. Eldridge has spoken to me. He believes the office may declare your claim relinquished as early as October." Cordelia stopped. She turned her face up. Did Mr. Eldridge say that, or did you say it? And he agreed. Hadley's mouth tightened. I'm offering you $40 now, up from 36. Tomorrow if you'll come into Marlin Springs. Mr. Hadley. Yes. Get off the rise. Mrs. Ashford. Get off. He did not move. Wesley stepped out from behind the windlass, the notebook in one shirt pocket, his grandfather's letter in the other. He came up to about Hadley's belt buckle. He looked up at the man. Mr. Hadley. Boy, my grandpa's letter says there's water here. What letter? The one in the notebook. Hadley looked at the boy, then at the woman in the shaft, then at the boy again. There is no water on this upland, son. The rod said so. 600 wells. My great-grandpa wrote a book. A book doesn't drill a well. A rod doesn't grow a tree. There was a silence. It was a sharp, small silence. Hadley did not have a thing to say to that. He looked at the cottonwoods. He looked for the first time up, into the leaves. He looked the way a man looks at a thing he has spent 9 years not looking at. His face did something. It was not a thing Cordelia could name. Mrs. Ashford. Yes. Your husband was a good man. I drilled his first well, in May. I know it. I am sorry for your loss. Mr. Hadley. Yes. Get off the rise. He turned. He walked his horse back down past the green grass into the gold. He mounted at the edge of the shadow. He did not look back. Wesley watched him go until the horse was small. Mama? Yes. He looked up at the leaves. I saw. Will it stop him? No. Then why does it matter? Cordelia leaned on her shovel. Because, Wesley, even men who do harm have a piece of them that remembers what their hands used to know. The trick is not to count on that piece, but to notice when it shows itself. He nodded. He filed it away. The 8th night was the night they came. Cordelia did not hear them at first. She had fallen asleep at the kitchen table with her head on her arms. The lamp was guttering low. Wesley was asleep in the loft. The pendulum clock said 1:30. What woke her was a stone falling on a stone. A particular sound. Field stone on the cylinder lining she had set with her own hands the day before. She sat up. She listened. Another sound. Heavier. Up at the well. She did not light the lamp. She put on her boots in the dark. She took Tobias's old hunting rifle down from the rafters. She did not check if it was loaded. She went out the kitchen door. The wind was up. She walked up the rise in her bare apron. She did not call out. She did not run. She got to the top. There were 2 of them. 2 figures at the rim of the well. They were rolling field stones from the lining she had built. They were tipping them in, down into the shaft, down onto the work of 7 days. Cordelia raised the rifle. You! Stop! The taller one swung around. The shorter one ran. The taller one did not run. He knew enough to not run when a barrel was pointing at him. She came closer. The moon was 3/4. The light fell across the man's face. She did not know him. He was perhaps 30, a stubble of beard, a canvas jacket, the kind of jacket a hand wore for a drilling crew. Drop the stone. He dropped it. Step away from the well. He stepped away. Did Hadley send you? Ma'am, please. Did he send you? He paid for it. Walk down the rise. Walk to your horse. Ride east. Do not come back. He walked. She kept the rifle on him until he was at the bottom of the rise. She heard his horse start. She heard the hoofbeats fade east. She lowered the rifle. She looked into the well. In the moonlight she could see 4, maybe 5, field stones lying on the bottom. The lining she had built up to 3 feet was partly collapsed on the south side. She sat down on the rim. She put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She had cried 4 nights ago for her grandfather, and for Jeremiah, and for Tobias. She did not have any crying left for 2 men in canvas jackets. What she had instead was something colder, something quieter. She sat at the rim until the sky began to grey. Then she got up. She walked down to the kitchen. She put the rifle back in the rafters. She put coffee water on the stove. She went up to the loft. Wesley. Mama. Get up. Get dressed. Is it morning? Almost. Get up. He got up. She walked him up the rise in the grey light. She let him see for himself. Wesley stopped at the rim. He looked into the shaft. He saw the stones at the bottom. He saw the partly collapsed lining. He saw what 7 days of his mother's hands, and his own hands on the rope, had become at the hands of 2 strangers who had ridden up in the dark while they slept. He sat down on the upturned pickaxe. He did not cry. He did what his mother had done 4 hours before. He put his face in his hands. For a small boy of 10, he held the position a long time. When he raised his face, his eyes were dry. Mama. Yes. Was it Hadley? Yes. What do we do? She sat down beside him on the pickaxe. She put her arm around his shoulders. The cottonwoods moved. The leaves came down silver. Wesley. Yes. When men with iron rods say your land is dry, what do you hear? He listened. I hear the leaves, Mama. What do the leaves say? They don't lie. What else? That we dig again. Yes, that we dig again. She held him for a minute. Then she stood. She climbed down into the shaft. She began to lift out the field stones one by one. By 11 o'clock, she had the bottom of the shaft cleared. By 2 in the afternoon, she had relined the south wall of the cylinder. Wesley worked the windlass without a word. At 4 in the afternoon, Henrietta Holcomb came up the rise. She had a covered basket. She stopped at the edge of the green grass. She had not been up the rise since the 5th day. Cordelia climbed up out of the shaft. Della. Hetty. I heard. How did you heard? Hank heard at the store. 2 men. One of them came in for breakfast at the boarding house, and the other one was telling it. They didn't know who I was. I was at the next table. Cordelia did not answer. Della. Yes. I told Hank I am coming up here Friday and he can lump it. He owes Hadley $38. He does not own me. He does not own what I do with my own afternoons. I have brought you a loaf and 3 jars of preserves, and I will bring you another loaf, Friday and one Tuesday after, and I will pull the windlass any day you say. I am not as young as I was, but I can pull a rope. Cordelia did not answer right away. She had not expected this. She had expected another apology. Another half loaf left at the gate. She had not expected. What this was. She took the basket from Hetty's hands. Her own hands were shaking. Hetty. Della. Thank you. Don't. Hetty. I should have come up the 2nd day. I should have come up the 3rd. I came up today. You came up today. Yes. The 2 women stood at the edge of the green grass. Wesley watched from the windlass. He had not moved. He was learning that summer the shape of how women in a hard country actually help each other. Not in the loud ways men did, in the small ways, with a basket, with a sentence delivered quietly. Hetty tied her bonnet tighter. She walked over to the windlass. Wesley. Mrs. Holcomb. Show me how this works. He showed her. She listened. She nodded. She put her hands on the rope. She pulled. The bucket came up dry loam. She tipped it on the mound. She lowered the bucket again. Cordelia watched for a moment. Then she climbed back into the shaft. The 9th day was the day the seepage came. Slow at first, a damp shine at the joints of the stone. By mid-morning the shine had become a slow weeping. By mid-afternoon there was an inch of standing water at the bottom of the shaft. She stood in it. Her boots took it up to the laces. She did not call up to Wesley yet. She wanted to be sure. The 10th day was the day the water rose. She had been working perhaps an hour past sunrise. She brought her spade down for what she meant to be the next cut. The spade went through into a layer of fine, clean sand, the color of new flour. The water came up out of the sand, the way milk comes up over the rim of an overfull pail. Smooth, steady, not a trickle, a flow. She stepped back against the stone wall. She watched the water rise around her boots, to her ankles, to her shins, to her knees. Wesley. Yes, Mama. Send the rope down. Mama. The well is here. He sent the rope. She tied it under her arms. He hauled her up. Hetty was at the rim that morning. When Cordelia's boots cleared the rim of the well, the water at the bottom had risen 6 inches above the layer of sand. When Cordelia sat down on the upturned pickaxe at the edge of the cottonwoods, she could see the water shining. Hetty covered her mouth with both hands. Wesley did not cover anything. He stood at the rim with the empty bucket in his hand. He looked at his mother, he looked at the water. He did not smile. The thing was too large for smiles yet. Mama. Yes, Wesley. The Cottonwoods told the truth. Yes, child. And so did Grandpa Jeremiah. She did not answer. She put her face in her bandaged hands. She wept quietly, without sound. For a long time, none of them moved. Wesley brought the kitchen pendulum clock up the rise at sundown. He set it on a flat stone. He marked the minute hand. He took the bucket down on the rope, drew it up full, poured it into Tobias's old washtub, lowered the bucket again. 8 bucketfuls, 1 gallon each, 8 gallons in 60 minutes. The water at the bottom of the shaft was no lower than it had been when he had begun. 8 gallons in the hour, Mama. 8. And the well didn't drop. No, Wesley. Then it's true. She looked at him, a small 10-year-old boy in a too small Sunday shirt, with a leather notebook in one pocket and his grandfather's letter in the other. She did not have the words. She did not need them. 3/4 of a mile to the east, on the road back into Marlin Springs, a man in a salt and pepper beard sat his horse and looked back at a small rise on a quarter section he had pronounced dry. He could just make out in the long July evening light the shape of a windlass against the pale sky. Cyrus Hadley sat his horse a long minute. Then he turned his horse west and rode toward the saloon at Marlin Springs, without remounting at any pace faster than a walk. He did not yet know that his wife in St. Louis would be dead before the leaves turned. He only knew that the small woman in the blue calico had not signed the offer, and that the bucket on her windlass, when she finally drew it, had not come up dry. The news traveled from Henrietta Holcomb to her husband Hank by Friday evening, from Hank to the blacksmith by Saturday noon, from the blacksmith to the general store before church on Sunday. By midweek, every man in Marlin Springs had heard that the widow Ashford had struck water at 12 feet on the upland, that the drillers had sworn dry, that a leather notebook and a boy of 10 had done what an iron rod and 600 wells could not. Cyrus Hadley was at the counter of the general store the morning the news reached him. He did not raise his voice. He laughed once, sharp, the way a man laughs who has practiced laughing. He turned to the men gathered at the stove. A wet pocket, gentlemen, perched water, few buckets and gone by Friday. The clay won't hold under draw. By Christmas she'll be on the eastern train. He bought his tobacco. He walked out. The men of the valley nodded thoughtfully. The drillers were experts. The widow was hopeful. The 2 words did not carry the same weight. Every man in that store knew which word the bank leant against. The neighbors who had been on the verge of riding up to the upland to see the well for themselves found other errands. The 2 men who had been preparing to ask Cordelia whether she might walk their land with the notebook quietly put the question aside. Cordelia understood by the end of the 2nd week. She had gone to the general store to buy salt and lamp oil. The 3 men at the stove had nodded at her. They had not spoken. She walked back to the wagon. She lifted Wesley up to the seat. Mama? Yes. Why are they angry? They are not angry. They look angry. They are afraid of being wrong. There is a difference. The dip came on the 14th day after striking water. She measured the first hour at sunrise. She got 5 gallons, not 8, 5. She measured at noon. 5. She measured at sundown. 6. She did not sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open before her. She read the page about the 5 trunks until the words began to come apart on her in the lamplight. Wesley came down from the loft at midnight. He took the notebook gently from under her hands. "Mama, listen." "I am listening." "No, listen." He turned to a page near the very end, a page she had not read carefully. Because it was at the very back, he read aloud, slowly. "Test the well 3 times in a dry month. Once is luck, twice is hope, 3 times is truth. A perched well dips with a hot day. It does not die, unless the grove dies." He looked up. He looked at the window. The cottonwoods stood black against the moon. The leaves were still moving. The leaves were still silver. "Mama, the grove hasn't died." She put her arms around him. She held him. Then she got up. She lit the second lamp. She wrote a brief polite letter to Mr. Adolphus Thurber, Registrar of Trego County. "Dear Sir, I write to request an inspection of a domestic well for homestead proof purposes. The well sits on the northeast quarter of Section 17. The land is filed under the late Jeremiah Ashford. I am Cordelia Ashford, his daughter-in-law, the widow of his son. I would be obliged for any date at your convenience. The well is currently producing 8 gallons by the hour with steady recharge. I will measure each morning at sunrise until you arrive." She signed her name. She sealed the envelope. The contrast was the whole of it. She thought. The drillers had measured a single dry shaft once. With a long iron rod, she would measure a wet shaft 30 times. With a wooden bucket. 1 reading was a verdict. 30 readings was a truth. She mailed the letter the next morning. She did not pass through Marlin Springs. She rode 3 miles north, to the smaller crossroads at Larchbend. Mr. Sigurd Olafsen was 60 years old. He had been 31 in 1858. He had walked into Trego County the same year her grandfather had walked the surveys. He had been the postmaster at Larchbend for 31 years. He took the letter with both hands. He looked at the address for the registrar. He looked at her. It was the look she had not been able to read before. She thought now she might be beginning to. "Mr. Olafsen." "Mrs. Ashford." "You knew my grandfather." His face did something. It was not surprise. It was relief, the relief of an old man who has been waiting for a very long time to be asked a particular question. "I knew him." "You walked the surveys with him?" "In 1858. "And with my father-in-law?" "Yes, Mrs. Ashford." "I have his notebook and a letter from Mr. Ashford tucked inside it." Mr. Olafsen put the envelope very carefully into the slot for the eastbound mail. He turned back to her. "Mrs. Ashford, will you sit a moment? I have Wesley in the wagon. The boy may come in. I have peppermint." She brought Wesley in. Mr. Olafsen gave him peppermint. He sat them down on a pine bench. He sat down across from them on a pine stool. He put his hands flat on his knees. He spoke quietly. "In the spring of 1858, 3 men walked from Riley County to the forks of the Solomon. Your grandfather was the surveyor. He had the leather notebook. Your father-in-law was a carpenter from Ohio. He had come west looking for land. I had come off the boat 7 years before. I was a Norwegian of 31. I had a strong back and the patience to count cottonwoods all day. 3 men. We walked 470 miles. We were gone from April until the first frost. We slept on the ground 68 nights. We marked 73 places where water could be brought up by hand, by a woman with a rope. Your grandfather was very specific about that. By a woman with a rope. Yes, Mrs. Ashford, he said it many times. He said, the men with iron rods will come, the women will have to know. Mark the cottonwoods, mark the willows, the seeps, so a woman alone can find what a rod cannot. Cordelia looked at him. Mr. Olafsen, did he know it would be me? He did not know it would be you. He knew it would be someone. And Jeremiah. Jeremiah filed on this quarter section in 1873. He chose it because it was on the list. He told me the week after the filing. He said, Sigurd, I have filed on number 41. He meant the 41st place on the list. 5 cottonwoods on a rise, 12 feet to water. He said he was going to give the land to his boy when his boy was old enough. He said, the boy has not married yet, but the boy will marry, and the boy's wife may be the one. He had not yet met you. He did not yet know your name. He met me in 1881. He told me at this counter that fall. He said, Sigurd, the boy's wife is Ezra Mosley's granddaughter. Sigurd, do you understand what I am telling you? He said it 3 times. He was a stubborn man. He liked to say a thing 3 times before he believed it. But Sigurd, do you understand? The land has come back to the family that walked it. Cordelia put her hand over her mouth. She could not speak. Wesley reached up. He put his small hand over hers. He did not understand all of it. He understood enough. Mr. Olafsen reached under his pine counter. He brought out a flat thing wrapped in oilcloth. He set it on the counter. He unwrapped it. A folded square of heavy paper. He spread it open. A map, hand-drawn, in 3 different inks, 29 years old, 73 small circles drawn along the courses of the Smoky Hill and Solomon Rivers, each circle numbered, each numbered circle with a small notation in pencil. 41 of the circles had been crossed out with a careful diagonal line, a date written next to each cross. Cordelia ran her finger down to number 41. It said, J. Ashford, 1873. The cross beside it had no second date yet, because she had not yet proved up. Mr. Olafsen folded the map again. Slowly, he pushed it across the counter toward her. Mr. Olafsen. Mrs. Ashford. This is yours. It was given to me to keep. Until it was needed. It is needed now. I cannot. You can. You are not alone, Mrs. Ashford. There are 3 of us who walked this country. 2 are gone. 1 remains. You have your grandfather. You have your father-in-law. You have me. And the trees. The trees most of all. She took the map. She held it against her chest. She did not weep. Something in her was settling instead, settling the way silt settles in still water. When she stood to go, Mr. Olafsen walked her to the door. Mrs. Ashford. Yes. Thurber will come. He is a careful man. I know. And Hadley. Yes. His wife is dying, in St. Louis. She stopped. I did not know. I have been the postmaster for 31 years. I know which letters come from where. The doctor's wife in St. Louis writes him every Tuesday. The handwriting has been failing for 2 months. Last week the letter was in a different hand. A woman who signs herself the matron of the hospital. Sigurd. I am not telling you to forgive him. No, I am telling you, he is not a devil. He is a drowning man. That is not the same, but it is not an excuse either. No. Some women would tell. Hetty Holcomb saw a face that night. I know she did. Mrs. Ashford, the choice is yours. She nodded. She drove home with Wesley pressed against her on the wagon seat. Halfway home, Wesley spoke. Mama. Yes. Are we going to tell the sheriff? She thought a long time. No, Wesley, we are not. Why? Because a woman who became this country built it without iron rods. A woman who became this country does not become it by sending the sheriff after a drowning man. What if he sends men again? He will not. His wife is dying. He has nothing left to send. Mama? Yes. I am glad we are not telling. So am I. I think Grandpa Jeremiah would be glad. She did not answer. She thought he would be glad. Mr. Adolphus Thurber arrived in a black buggy on the morning of the 31st day. He was 64 years old. He had been registrar of Trego County for 19 years. He wore a black wool suit, steel-rimmed spectacles. He carried a brass-fitted measuring rod in a long leather case and a register's logbook with a marbled cover. He stepped down from the buggy. He removed his hat at the gate. Mrs. Ashford. Mr. Thurber, thank you for coming. It is the office, not a favor. Yes, sir. He did not waste talk. He asked to see the well. She walked him up the rise. Wesley followed behind, with the kitchen pendulum clock under both arms. Mr. Thurber's eyebrows lifted very slightly when he saw the cottonwood grove. He stopped at the edge of the green grass. He looked up at the leaves. For a long moment, he said nothing. But Cordelia saw him touch the brim of his hat, with 2 fingers. The way a careful man tips his hat to a thing he had forgotten was on the prairie. Hadley arrived 10 minutes later. He came up the rise with his jaw set, his hat brim low. He was thinner than he had been in July. His coat hung looser at the shoulders. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had received a telegram that morning. Mr. Thurber turned to him. Mr. Hadley, I was told you had been the original driller. Yes, sir. You may stand and observe. Yes, sir. You will not speak during the measurement. Hadley opened his mouth. He closed it. Hetty Holcomb arrived 2 minutes later, on foot, in her Sunday dress, without telling Hank. She stood at the edge of the green. She pressed her hands together. She did not say a word for the next hour. Mr. Thurber lowered his measuring rod. He measured the diameter of the shaft, the depth from rim to water surface. He recorded both. He dipped the bucket on the rope. He timed the recharge of the well by his pocket watch. He measured for 63 minutes. He drew 8 bucketfuls in the first 60. He drew the 9th bucket in the 63rd minute. Half full, because he had overdrawn slightly past the minute, and the well had needed 3 minutes to recharge. He did not hurry. He did not slow. When he was done, he sat on a flat stone at the edge of the green. He wrote in the logbook. The pen moved across the page in the careful, unbroken script of 19 years of registrar's work. Then he closed the book on his finger. He stood up. He read aloud what he had written. 8 gallons drawn within the hour, with consistent recharge throughout. Water clear, no sediment. Cylinder integrity sound. Sustained yield, observed and verified by witness on this day. This is a registered domestic well, suitable for homestead final proof inspection. File number 4112, Trego County, this dry summer. He looked up. Mrs. Ashford, your claim is on track. There was a silence in the cottonwood grove that you could have measured with the same pocket watch. Hadley's mouth opened. A freak. Perched aquifer, sir. It won't last winter. Mr. Thurber looked at him. A long moment, over the rims of his steel spectacles. He did not speak. Then Wesley stepped forward. He was 10 years old. He was wearing his Sunday clothes, which no longer fit at the wrists. He had washed his face that morning in the kitchen basin without being asked. He looked up at Hadley, not angrily, not in triumph, with the steady gaze of a boy who had been carrying his great-grandfather's notebook in his shirt pocket for 12 weeks. Mr. Hadley. Boy. My great-grandpa Ezra always said, the trees don't lie, sir. The rod just couldn't hear them. Hetty pressed a hand to her mouth. Mr. Thurber lifted his pen. He wrote one short line in the margin of the logbook. She found out 2 weeks later that he had written, Boy Ashford, age 10. Words for the record. Hadley stood very still. He removed his hat, slowly, with both hands. He did not speak. He looked once up at the leaves of the cottonwoods above the grove. His shoulders shook. Once. He did not let it become anything more. But Cordelia saw it, a man who had drilled 600 wells, standing under 5 trees, with a telegram about a hospital matron in his coat pocket. Cordelia stepped forward. She did not touch him. "Mr. Hadley, Mrs. Ashford, I am sorry about your wife." He did not answer. He could not. "Mr. Hadley, yes, if you need water for your rig, while you settle your business in St. Louis, you may take it from this well. My boy will pull the rope for you. We will not charge you." A long silence, the longest of the morning. Hadley put his hat back on. He nodded once. He turned. He walked his horse down the rise, without remounting. By the end of the next month, he had sold his Marlin Springs operation to a Mr. Bayard from Hayes. He had taken the eastbound train to St. Louis to bury his wife. He did not return to Trego County. Hetty crossed the green grass. She put her arms around Cordelia, without saying anything. Mr. Thurber closed the logbook. He tucked it into his inside coat pocket. He looked at Wesley for a long, quiet moment. "Boy." "Yes, sir." "You did your great-grandfather honor today." "Thank you, sir. Mind the well. It is yours now, as much as your mother's." "I will, sir." The buggy rolled down the rise. The cottonwoods moved their leaves once. 2 summers passed. The Ashford homestead changed slowly. The way good things change. The garden tripled. The cattle herd rose from 5 to 10. Wesley turned 12. He grew 3 inches in the first of those summers. He learned to swing a scythe at the end of it. He still carried the small leather notebook in a shirt pocket on long walks, though he rarely opened it anymore. He did not need to. Cordelia's quarter section, filed now under her own name, was 4 months from the federal patent. 3 other widows in the county had asked her that second summer if she would walk their land with them. She had walked all 3. 2 had found water. 1 had not. The 3rd had taken the train east. Some land was dry. Some grandfathers had not walked it. The notebook was not magic. The notebook was only what 3 young men had written down on 470 miles of country in 1858. The Crawford family arrived the August of the 2nd summer. Mrs. Lavinia Crawford was 28. Recently widowed, she had inherited a quarter section from a brother who had died of brain fever. Hadley's old crew had drilled a 50-foot test hole and pronounced it dry. Hetty Holcomb brought her to the Ashford homestead on a Saturday afternoon. Lavinia stepped down from the wagon, 2 little girls behind her. Cordelia brought them lemonade on the porch. "Mrs. Crawford, Mrs. Ashford, Hetty tells me you had your land called dry." "I did." "Will you walk my land with me?" "I will." She took the leather notebook from the small drawer in the kitchen sideboard. She put it in her own apron pocket. They walked the 3 miles to the Crawford claim. Wesley walked behind, with the 2 little girls. The older girl was 8. She reached up at one point and slipped her hand into Wesley's. Wesley did not pull his hand away. They found the Crawford cottonwoods on the 2nd pass of the upland, 5 mature trunks. Cordelia stopped at the edge of the green. She gave the notebook into Lavinia's hand. "Lavinia, count the trunks within the throw of your bonnet." Lavinia counted. 5. "Now look at the leaves. Silver. Then the water is closer than the men with their iron rods could ever guess. My grandfather taught me this when I was 9 years old. He learned it from old plains hunters and Pawnee guides who walked this country before there were railroads." Lavinia put her hand on the deepest furrowed of the 5 trunks. Her eyes filled. "How long?" 10 days, with my boy on the rope, 12 feet to water." The older girl reached up, touched the bark. Wesley stood beside Cordelia. He did not say anything. He had given his great-grandfather's words. Once was enough. That night, by the lamplight at the kitchen table. Cordelia copied out the cottonwood passage from the notebook onto a fresh sheet of paper for Lavinia to take home. Lavinia folded the sheet small. She put it inside the locket at her throat. In the years that followed, that passage, copied, recopied, passed in lockets from kitchen to kitchen, would travel through 3 counties of western Kansas, in Trego, in Gove, in Sheridan, whenever a driller declared a homestead claim, dry on the high plains, and a widow was offered 20 cents an acre to walk away. Somewhere in the next valley, a woman would open a folded paper and count Cottonwoods. The phrase that traveled with the paper was the one Wesley had spoken at the well day. 6 words. They were known among the widows of 3 counties for a generation. The trees don't lie. The rod just couldn't hear them. The cottonwoods above the Ashford well moved their silver leaves once, and were still. Cordelia Ashford never appeared in any history book. Her name is not carved on any monument. But somewhere tonight, a woman is being told, by an expert, that she is wrong, about her own land, about her own life, about her own quiet knowing, and somewhere else. A woman is opening a small leather book she had almost forgotten her grandfather left her. If her story has touched something quiet in you, we would be grateful for a like and a subscribe. And in the comments, tell us whose old wisdom is still listening through you. Thank you for sitting beneath these cottonwoods with us tonight. The silver leaves are still moving because of listeners like you.